Just like to thank the National Building Control and Market Surveillance Office for inviting us here today to give this presentation. The topics that we've been asked to cover in our presentation, an overview and the collation of auxiliary certificates, inspection by others, the particulars to prepare the Annex of Documents, and the inspection plan as implemented. Before I delve into the auxiliary certs, I think first we just need to understand their place within the overall BCAR process. The BCAR process is underpinned by statutory certificates at both commencement and at completion. The statutory certificates are generated by the BCMS and can be downloaded from the BCMS once the project is registered. If we look at commencement first, so there's 6 statutory certs at commencement. So we have the notice of assignment of the assigned certifier, the notice of assignment of the builder, and the commencement notice. Each of them 3 certs are signed by the building owner. Then we have the undertaking by the assigned certifier, the undertaking by the builder. And the final cert then would be the certificate of compliance design. This is signed by the design certifier, one of the nominated roles. The design certifier is responsible for carrying out their own design and coordination any design activities of others. The code of practice envisages that there are likely to be other designers and other specialists involved. So if we take it at commencement, before the design certifier would sign off on his cert, he has a conversation with the other design team members that are engaged on the project at that time, and he would be asking them to sign off an auxiliary design cert. So that would be your architect, your engineers, might be your fire and your DAC consultant. There may be some specialist designers engaged at that time as well. When he's satisfied, then he's collated these auxiliary design certs. He would then sign off on his design certificate, and that's uploaded to the BCMS at commencement. The other stage where we need to focus in on would be at the completion. So at completion, the certificate of compliance on completion is signed by, part A is signed by the builder, part B is signed by the assigned certifier. But when signing that, the assigned certifier is relying on auxiliary certs provided by others. So there's a schedule of certs, and these would be both certificates for inspection and then certificate of compliance or certificate of completion for design, again signed by the various design members involved in the project. So that's just teeing it up where the auxiliary certificates sit within the overall context. Just looking then at the code of practice, this is covered in the code of practice. Code of practice, it's section 422. Apart from the assigned certifier and the design certifier, there is likely to be a range of certifiers on most projects, including certifiers appointed by the building owner, by the design team, and/or by the builder. Auxiliary certificates may include, some obvious ones here, but the architect or architecture technologists or technicians, consultant engineers, we'll be looking here at civil, structural, mechanical, electrical, generally appointed by the building owner, to design, inspect, and certify the relevant elements of works. We can have specialist designers. Examples here would be piling, for piling works, for mechanical, electrical works, for soil and waste pipe work, for precast. And this is not a definitive list. This list can go on and on. These are appointed by the builder to design and certify the relevant elements of works. Just again, competent technical tradesperson that install products and/or test on completion, and/or the builder, subcontractor, suppliers, and manufacturers, both in relation to certifying, design, and construction, and also in relation to components or assemblies supplied for the works, and/or in relation to tests. And then it is noted at the end of that section within the code of practice, and this ties all auxiliary certifiers together. Certifiers should exercise reasonable skill, care, and diligence in exercising their duties. So just going to go back and say, okay, what exactly are auxiliary certificates? These are certificates provided by competent persons, designers, subcontractors, suppliers, etc., confirming that specific elements of the design, construction, or works comply with the building regulations. Under the BCAR process, these auxiliary certs are crucial for demonstrating that all aspects of the building's design and construction meet the required standards. The construction professionals, bodies and industrial bodies have developed templates for these auxiliary certificates. So the RI, AI, the ACEI, Engineers Ireland, SCSI, CIC, and the CIF, they came together and they drafted up templates for us, which we can use. So we will talk about some of these templates. First suite of templates, let's say, auxiliary certificates have been developed to be used by consultants, specialist and unregistered consultants who have been commissioned to provide professional design services and appropriate inspection plans. So if we take these suite of certs, we have a suite of A certs, which will be signed off by the architect, suite of E certs, which is for the chartered engineers. The B certs then is your building surveyors. And then we have the suite of S certs, which is specialist designers or unregistered consultants. You notice under each suite we have a D, an I, and a C annex on each cert. The AD, for example, that's provided at commencement. So it's signed by the architect at commencement and it's handed to the design certifier. I'll just stick on this with the AI then is signed at completion of the works, and it's to validate that the designer has completed their inspection plan. And then we have the AC, so it's an auxiliary certificate of design on completion of the works. So that deals with the, I suppose, design. We also then, auxiliary certs have been developed to be used by subcontractors, specialist contractor, and subcontractors who have been assigned to construct, supervise, and certify their subcontract or subcontract works. And essentially here we have two certs in this bracket. We have the CS, CIF01, and that will be signed by a subcontractor engaged by the builder. And then there's a second cert, which is the CSS cert, CIF02, and that's signed by a subcontractor who would be engaged by a subcontractor. Auxiliary certs, I suppose the word said, auxiliary certs, they're not statutory certs in the sense of the main completion certificate signed by the builder and an assigned certifier on completion of the works. However, they do support the main certificate of compliance on completion by attesting that those particular specialist areas were designed, installed, inspected in compliance with the relevant building regulations. Who produces the auxiliary cert? So it's the person or the company who carries out specialist works provide the certificate. The certificate must be signed by a principal or a director of the company. It's very important. They must also be a competent person and should exercise reasonable skill, care, and diligence in the performance of their duty. I suppose that phrase there, that comes up time and time again within the code of practice. So a competent person should exercise reasonable skill, care, and diligence in the performance of their duties when certifying compliance of their work. I just want to home in on some certs then. So I've drafted up this table, and look, there is other examples or other scenarios here, but I tried to identify what I would kind of see as the most common scenarios when we're asking for subcontractors to provide auxiliary certificates. So the scenario one, right, the subcontractor is being engaged to supply and install. The design is not with the subcontractor. The design is by a consultant auxiliary certifier. So that's one of the signatures of the ED or the AD. So it might be designed by your civil structural engineer or your architect. So the requirement here from the subcontractor is to provide us with a CS, or if it's a subcontractor, it's CSS. And when he fills out that on page 1, he completes page 1 in its entirety. And then on page 2, we have Annex 1, Annex 2, or Schedule 1, Schedule 2. He's only required here to fill out Annex 1. So the subcontractor is carrying out works designed by others. There's no requirement for an SD, SISC. Typical examples would be maybe block work or RC work or painting contractor. That's the first scenario. It's relatively straightforward. The next example I'm given is a subcontractor who has design responsibility, supply and install. So the design, not designed by one of the consultant auxiliary designers. So it's not being designed by the architect or a structural engineer. This is where the subcontractor himself is taking on this design responsibility. So in this scenario, we get the CS cert or CSS cert again, complete page 1. Then on page 2 of the cert, Annex 1 must be completed and Annex 2 must be completed. So Annex 1 details the particulars that have been provided to that subcontractor for them to carry out their works. Annex 2 details the design taken on by that subcontractor. So just looking at notes, I think we've covered a subcontractor takes on design responsibility. There's no SD, SI, SC requirement. Annex 2, the wording included in the annex, right? And I think this is important. The wording included in the annex should detail the subcontractor's basis of competence. So he's going to carry out a certain element of design here. He needs to also provide us information of the basis of his competency, his qualifications and his experience in this area. I also think it's advisable to seek details of the subcontractor's professional indemnity insurance here as well. That if he's going to carry out a design element, he should have the insurance cover to back that up. The third scenario then I'm going to touch on is where we have a subcontractor. Again, he's taken on design responsibility, supply and install. The difference in this scenario is this is where the subcontractor is going to bring in a third-party designer. So he's not going to do it himself. He might feel maybe he doesn't have the confidence, the experience. He's going to bring in another entity to carry out the design. So if we're looking at the certs required, again, we have the CS or the CSS. Subcontractor will fill this out, page 1, complete in full. He completes Annex 1 here again. So this is the information that's been provided to him by the main builder. Annex 2 then, so he's not taking on the design responsibility directly, but I feel that in Annex 2, he should make reference to the third-party design here. So to tie everything together, he should detail, I brought in Joe Bloggs to carry out the design. Then the designer himself, so the third-party designer, would be asking them then to provide an SI and an SC. So the SI is to attest to the inspections carried out, and an SC then is Auxiliary Cert for design on completion. Okay. Just a note there, the very last in the bottom corner, an SI must be backed by inspection evidence. So at times where I've been presented with SI auxiliary certs, and I'm saying, well, can I see the inspections that support this document? There has to be inspections, I suppose. There's no point in signing paperwork for the sake of signing paperwork. These have to mean something. So, okay. I suppose I would refer everyone to the practice notes 1 and 2 in particular when it comes to auxiliary certificates. They're very useful. Anyone that's filling out certs should familiarise with the practice notes. I just draw your attention to compliance. Practice note 1, clause 6, no auxiliary certificate can be amended without the collective approval of all the organisations by which the auxiliary certs have been agreed. At the end, I might just touch back at the end of the presentation. Some of the previous speakers have mentioned it. We have been experiencing some pushback recently in relation to subcontractors signing the suite of S-certs. So we might just come back to that at the end of the presentation just to get people's views. Okay, the next thing I'm going to, we've spoken about the certs. I want to speak now about the collation of the auxiliary certificates. So this is how do we identify, or how do we put that schedule together, identifying what certs we require. So where I would generally start is a review of the design responsibility matrix. If we have a comprehensive matrix, it's a great place to start. This should itemize out, break up the building, who's responsible for each element of the design. The next thing that I focus in on, before commencement, I would always schedule preliminary inspection plan workshops with each design discipline. And I would take that opportunity as we go down through each work package. On that schedule, we drill into it. Is there any specialist design requirements here? Does the principal designer, do they see the need for a specialist coming in here? And we would detail that one on within the inspection plan. I'd have a column and I would detail out as we go down per element if there is specialist design, if it's by the builder, if it's by a specialist designer brought in from the principal designer. The other workshops that I would always schedule before commencement is workshops with the builder. And again, drill into the same thing. Ask the questions to the builder. What elements of design are you responsible for? What specialists are you going to bring in? And again, we detail it on the inspection plan. For the avoidance of delays and other issues at the end of a project, it's important that the specific requirements regarding auxiliary certificates are agreed with the assigned certifier at the earliest possible time. I suppose, yeah, as early as you can in a project, if you can put the bones on that schedule. What auxiliary certs are we going to get? Who's going to provide them? But I'd also just flag here that this should be a live document right the way through the construction project, because the various times there could be additional design resources brought on board. The subcontractor can be brought in by the builder. So this document needs, this schedule would need to be reviewed on a regular basis. Just kind of giving a workflow, right? Submission, the competent person issues and submits their auxiliary cert to the assigned certifier. And likewise, I suppose I'm looking here at the completion of the project. It would be very similar if we were looking at the commencement. This would go to the design certifier. The assigned certifier is responsible for the coordination and collating these individual certificates along with their inspection records. And then the BCMS submission, the AC lodges the certificate of compliance on completion to BCMS, supported by the schedule of auxiliary certificates from other members of the design and the construction team. Right, so I've spoken a huge amount about, to this point, it's certificates. We're signing paperwork here. But that's not going to deliver as a project. As important as the paperwork is, right, there has to be actions that support that paperwork. And this is where we drill into inspections. So within the suite of auxiliary certificates, we're getting a certificate that attests that the designer has carried out their inspection plan. So notes here, compliance must be verified by inspections, right? Inspection records are required from all auxiliary certifiers with design responsibility. And that's kind of my default position. If you design something, you should be inspecting it on site. Inspection evidence must be inspection events must be updated on the inspection plan as they are completed. And again, I feel that this is particularly important, that on my projects, I would always schedule fortnightly BCAR review meetings. And I generally, my approach is that it's a standalone meeting. It's not something that I tag to the end of the progress meeting. That BCAR in itself, I believe, deserves that importance. It's a meeting. Everyone's in the meeting. We know why we're here. We're here to look at compliance. So within that meeting, then I would always pull up the inspection plan on the screen, see where we are. When's the last inspection the architect has done? Has he updated the inspection plan? Are the inspection records uploaded? It is not possible to inspect every item of work, and therefore appropriate professional judgment and risk assessment should be used. And again, to me, this goes back to the PIP workshops that we had at commencement. So there should be a discussion around risk when we're looking at inspections. When I talk about risk, I'm talking about risk here, risk against not achieving compliance. So again, we're looking at risk. What's the likelihood? What's the severity? And what's the ease of inspection? So they should all feed in then, and we should be to each line item within the inspection plan, we should be assigning a risk to that. And that then should inform us of the level of inspection that we need to complete as we go through the construction period. Okay, I was going to touch on this, the frequency. The scope and frequency of inspections should be detailed on the inspection plan and kept under review. And suppose everything, as an assigned certifier, that's one of the key things. Everything's under review constantly. That we don't just agree something and lock it away. No, we revisit it throughout the construction period. The size and nature of a particular building project will also be an influencing factor on the frequency of inspections. And I would also recommend that within our inspection plan, again, going back to the PIP workshops, we identify with the design team critical milestones or benchmarks or first of kind. So we could have a column again. We look at the work package we ask the question to the design team, is this something that you would like to see benchmarked? It's almost the whole point. And again, this kind of ties into the next, so the inspection notification framework. So I think this is covered, Code of Practice 7.4, I think it is. The inspection notification framework should identify general stages of items of work the individual certifiers wish to be notified of as and when they are ready for inspection. Right, so this is where we identify certain elements in the build that the builder is going to notify the auxiliary certifiers. It may be, I don't know, the first foundation that's been poured. Yes, the design team want to go out and have a look at that. So there can be overlap here with benchmarks and notification framework. The INF should be prepared in conjunction with the inspection plan, so it sits alongside the inspection plan, in conjunction with the design and construction teams and those who are providing auxiliary certificates. So again, this all feeds, it's a collaborative process. It's not the assigned certifier, he's not certifying the building on his own. He's certifying the building using the expertise and the knowledge of all the various disciplines, from the design team to the builder to the subcontractors. Everyone has input here. Before the commencement, so the INF should be in place before the commencement of work on site, and it should be communicated to the building owner and the builder. Okay, so follow-up procedures. We have all our design team going around carrying out inspections as detailed in the PIP and INF. But the purpose of an inspection, it's not to tick a box. The purpose of an inspection is the design team going out there, interrogating the build to ensure that we're achieving the intent of that design. So invariably, the design team or the inspectors will pick up on non-compliant issues during their inspections, right? So this is an issue that needs to be addressed. If it's left as it is, we have a risk to compliance here. So it must be addressed to the satisfaction of the auxiliary certifier. And I would also say the assigned certifier should be reviewing these as well. Closing of an issue is dependent on evidence. Again, one of the previous speakers spoke about this. It's not a statement or an opinion. So if something has been spotted on site, I need to see evidence of how that's been addressed. Both with, it could be photographic evidence, it could be a report and a narrative to support that. The workflow needs to be documented. And again, previous speaker mentioned, the use of software can greatly assist in the tracking of compliance, and there's various softwares out there. I suppose in my experience, there's many different softwares. Some have different strengths and weaknesses than others, but the overall harmony in a project where each design discipline and the builder are all using the same platform, to me, it just improves the process no end, that all the eyes are focused on the same platform. Close out of issues is generally quicker than in that scenario too. There's less risk of an issue within a report, sitting in a report and no one spotting it until a number of weeks later, and then there's a difficult conversation that maybe works has proceeded. How do we validate that that work or that corrective action has taken place? So I definitely recommend software, but if we can get everyone onto the same software, it does improve the workflow. Okay, we're going to move on then to particulars to prepare the Annex of Documents. The Annex of Supporting Documents is a comprehensive collation of documentation that provides evidence that the building and its various components have been designed, constructed, and commissioned to meet the requirements of the building regulations. Again, I would say it's never too early to start development of this schedule. And I suppose on my projects, what I like to do as early as I can, once construction work starts, is put this schedule together and present it to the build team and say, look guys, this is what the documentation that we have to provide prior to certification. And again, to say that this document is live right the way through the project, and it needs to be revisited. But as best you can, I think it's beneficial if we can put that picture in front of the build team at the earliest possible opportunity. When drafting the schedule, input should be sought from auxiliary designers, design certifiers, and the builder. So again, when I'm putting this schedule together, I would work first on my auxiliary certifier schedule. there's certain documents that I know are going to be required, your design change log, your calculations, your drawing registers at completion, drawing packs, specifications. But then I would reach out to each design discipline or each auxiliary certifier and say to them, right, at completion, I'm going to be asking you to provide me with your certificate of design on completion. What documentation do you need to have in place before you will sign that cert? Right? And again, there's a bit of over and back and a bit of working together. But then we populate a schedule here that everyone is comfortable with. We present it in front of the builder and say, look, this is what we see, the documentation that you guys have to provide. And like a lot of that information can be testing and commissioning, it can be in relation to materials, the DOP and CE certs, it can be QA, QC, documentation from the construction works, it can be technical submittal register, benchmark registers, the entire list of documentation that we'd like to see. Inspection plan is implemented. This for me, it starts at the PIP. So at commencement, we have a preliminary inspection plan. So that's our intent. This is what we're going to inspect. At completion then, what we have to produce is an as implemented inspection plan. On completion of the works, all inspections completed over the project duration by the auxiliary certifiers and the assigned certifier need to be logged on the inspection plan. And again, what does that look like in reality? To me, that is, we have our PIP, our schedule. It's inserting the date against each work element when it was inspected, and it might be inspected multiple times. And each design discipline will have their own section within the inspection plan, and they need to populate it. And again, just stressing again, the importance, I bring this up at every meeting. Let's look at the inspection plan. This is not something that I'll populate in 2 or 3 months' time. This is populated live as it happens. The inspection plan is a live document throughout the construction period and should be reviewed and discussed with the design team and the build team on a regular basis. Again, I think that's one of the key things. That's why I always, BCAR meeting, I'll start with the inspection plan. Let's have a look at the inspection plan. Where are we in the inspection plan? Date of last inspection, has it been updated? What issues? The issues log, where are we on the issues log? It's critically important that the inspection plan is updated as inspection happens. A well-implemented inspection plan is the cornerstone of ensuring a building project is delivered in compliance with the building regulations. I really believe that if you put time into managing the inspection plan and everyone buys into the inspection plan, it guides everything else. It guides our inspections. It guides the issues log. In parallel with that, we have our schedule of documents that we're also tracking all the way through the project. I'm just throwing this up here, like everyone has a plan and then something unexpected or unforeseen circumstances can happen. So I'm just throwing out a note here that what happens if the builder or the assigned certifier step down or are no longer involved in the project. Right? First and foremost, the owner of the building must notify the building control authority within 14 days of such change and must submit a new notice of assignment and undertaking. Failure to do so is an offence. But I suppose what I want to focus on here is the importance of keeping our records up to date. If for any reason at any stage, one of our designers or subcontractors, for whatever reason, leave the project needs to be in the best position it can at that time. Have we all the records up to that point? A scenario like this, it imposes additional risk on certification, and the risk needs to be evaluated and managed. And to me, that management starts from commencement. We should be managing this all along. If this type of analysis happens, there may be a requirement for additional validation of works completed by the builder to that point. And again, I just said this highlights the importance of keeping the BCAR records up to date. We're nearly there. Key takeaways, right? And these are just some notes that I've just jotted at the end of the consider the development of design responsibility matrix as soon as possible. Right? So to develop design responsibility matrix as soon as possible on a project. And it needs to be interrogated, right? Focusing in on any areas of shared design responsibility. Be very clear who's responsible for what. And there could be grey areas here. So spending time at the early stage of the project, I think it's well worth spending some time on that. I mentioned this before, the use of a common software greatly assists in the tracking of inspections, of issues, and the collation of the auxiliary certs and the support documents. And these softwares allows you to populate it, you can assign responsibility, you can assign a reviewer. That all adds to the ease of collecting this documentation. Say there, the role of the Assigned Certifier is not just to collate paperwork. The Assigned Certifier must conduct regular inspections during the construction to ensure that the work approve plans and regulations. The Annex of Support Documents should be developed at the earliest stage of a project. This is a live document until the completion cert has been uploaded to the BCMS and should be reviewed on a regular basis to ensure that it captures the full scope of compliance. I mentioned this earlier, I just wanted to raise this at the end of the presentation because this is something that has have getting pushback of late, where I've been asking certain subcontractors to supply a suite of auxiliary certs. In recent months, there's been some uncertainty from some stakeholders regarding when it's appropriate for them to use the suite of certs and when it's appropriate to use the CS or the CSS certs. In May of this year, the CIF issued guidance to their members regarding the signing of the SDSISC auxiliary certs. And I suppose the focus then regarding the wording in clauses 6 and 7. Clause 6 relates to plans, calculations, specifications and particulars included in the schedule to the commencement notice or 7-day notice. And clause 7 then relates to undertaking the conditions of engagement, responsible for coordinating and integration of design within the overall scheme. So again, look, it's guidance given by the CIF to their members. There was also guidance given by the ACEI to their members in relation to what they should expect when they're depending on both auxiliary certs, the CS, CSS, but also on the suite of S certs. I suppose my interpretation that the guidance given by both of them bodies, it's given in isolation to their members. What I would have preferred to see was that the bodies come together and they give a kind of a joint statement or single statement would be issued. I think it would it'd be easier for the Assigned Certifier to track forward then. That's it. That's the conclusion of my presentation. Thanks everyone for your time.